So over the past week, I got a ton of messages from a lot of people asking me, yo, how we can get those hard-hitting drums like mauP, John Summit, Dolla. So to answer that question, today I decided to make this video to show you my process and share with you some cool tips that I'm using to make my drums sound way more better and more harder. But before we start, if you want to support the channel, you can head over to loudlib.com because we just released our Tech House Master Bundle 2024 edition, which has over 1,000 sounds. So if you want to create better tracks, you should check it out. So with that being said, let's get straight to the point and show you some techniques that are going to make your drums sound much more better so that you can get those hard-hitting drums. First, let's talk about sound selection. You see, everything is somehow connected to sound selection. You can't blame the other things like your mom, your dog, your DAW, your tempo, or everything. It all comes down to sound selection. The majority of shitty tracks comes from poor sound selection. For example, let's say you're using a 909 basic kick, which is completely different from an 808 kick. So if we compare the difference here between the 808 and the 909, is obviously that the 909 has a stronger pitch and it's longer, while the 808 is a little more mellowed out. So, but I'm not saying it's bad or anything, but if we can match those two into one single kick, that's the perfect kick in my opinion. So that's essentially what we tried with the kicks from our pack. We tried to combine both so we can get that subby from the classic 909 with that punchy feeling from the 808 in one single kick. So if you're trying to achieve that kind of drums you want with more punch, more presence, look for sounds with less sustain, which means more punch. So shorter sounds most of the time are more punchier. For example, here I have this kick, which is very long. So you can hear that the vibe is more warm, more bassy. However, if I change this with a shorter kick like this one, you can hear the difference. That is a more direct vibe, it's a straight sound. And the same concept applies with the hats, claps, snares, open hats, everything. So let's try to apply this concept in a balanced way to create the perfect drum loop. Okay, this sounds good. And I'm gonna choose this one. Let's try this. Okay, it sounds kind of nice. It could be better, but I like it. It's pretty decent. Okay. Yeah, that's cool. Okay, so the next technique that I want to talk about is called drum accentuation and layering. Now, this is something very simple and very subtle in a lot of tracks. It's about minor changes here and there, you know, but people do not pay too much attention, but they are there and they are making huge improvements. And sometimes you don't realize that why some drums sound so damn good and versatile and others don't. So this technique is about minor changes, but stacked together, it makes a lot of improvements. For example, let's say I have this kick drum, but instead of having this boring version, I can bring more phantom kicks here and there and lower the velocity, and suddenly I got something different. And I can incorporate this kind of variation in different parts of the loop without losing the rhythm and without making the track sound boring over time. So let's say I have this hi-hat loop. Simple and basic, not too bad. But let's say I want to make them way more interesting. I can go to the MIDI notes and pan each one of them differently. Left and right, left and right. And then I'm gonna layer another hat every 2 beats on top of this loop. And let's add some reverb on this one, for example. And now if I play everything together, you can hear that there's a really big difference, you know, if you're paying attention. And the same thing applies with the claps. So I have this drum loop. Now then let's add some phantom claps, lower the velocity, and let's add the same clap or a different one on top of it. And let's add some simple delay and some reverb, not too much. And we get something completely different. There's a subtle change, there's a subtle movement in it. So you can hear that this is going to create this sort of like variety. So yeah, the thing is that sometimes you don't have to add more things, and getting creative with what you have is way more better. So yeah. Now the next technique that I want to show you to improve your tech house drums is to use ghost percussions, and ghost effects. And you might think that percussions are for a more Latin vibe and effects are for transitions and risers and build-ups and everything, stuff like that. But you can basically add percussion and ghost effects on pretty much everything. You gotta spice up your drums in some shape or form, because house drums are boring most of the time and so repetitive, and you can't break that rhythm, you know? So you kind of have to play with what you have. So it's all about adding very quiet, short and percussive sounds to add some subtle movement and interest to the drums. And ghost effects are similar, but they can be any type of sound, not just percussion. So I have this drum loop right here, and now let's add a one-shot percussion. Let's put it offside, and let's say I want to add some delay on it and add a little bit of reverb, not too much, and now we get something like this. Oh, you can hear that I get different vibes, different rhythms, and the same thing applies for the effects. Most of the time, I just take a crash sound, cut it in two different parts, and I do something like this. So yeah, it brings more movement to it, so definitely you should try this thing. Ghost percussions, ghost effects, they're really making huge improvements, and you can use it in so many ways. Okay, so the final technique that I want to show you is to bus all of your drums together. So this is going to allow you to process all of your drums in just one single element. So you can apply your effects and your signature sound on everything. There's no that's a clap, that's a kick, that's a hat. No, it's everything together. It's one unit. So the first thing is to make sure that all of your drums are in one track. And then we want all of those drums to sound like they are supposed to be together. So I'm going to quickly walk you through my processing chain and show you all the effects that I'm using to achieve that great drums. So first, I've got some saturation, not too much, just a little bit. I make sure that I'm not going into red. And I look for a maximum 1.5 dB increase in level after applying saturation. Next up, I got a simple compressor, which I'm not using it every time, but sometimes it does help, with a ratio of 3.2 and then a threshold between 5, 10 most of the time, so I keep things simple. Next, I add some subtle distortion with 30% threshold, and then I turn the overall volume down here maybe around 30% as well. So I don't go crazy with the distortion, just a little touch to give some character to the sound. And sometimes when I really feel that the drums are not balanced, I like to add an EQ and boost the highs, maybe 1.5 dB most of the time, only if it's needed. So yeah, that's it. That's all my processing chain. I don't have too much stuff going on. I keep it simple, yet it's so effective. So I hope you enjoyed this video. And as you can see, there are a lot of techniques that you can apply. There's simple stuff, but you have to get creative. And don't forget this when you're having some beat block or some writing block or some creative blocks. They can literally change everything. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, drop a comment down below if you've got other tips and techniques. So yeah, you guys are so dope. Thank you so much for watching this video, and see you next time.